General Hospital. I've talked about this show a lot lately and all of its dire decision making from the producers and the writers when it comes to the character of Trina and the pairing of Spencer and Trina, and just how the slowness of all of their stories that take a year to get to a fucking climax with no real payoffs in between is just awful. So it should be no surprise that General Hospital is in 10th place in my rankings. Again, very close to last place. I almost put it in ninth place. It almost got out of a 10th and into ninth. But the soap opera in ninth, which is a British soap opera, that is very boring. But at least that show wrote this really compelling television where a character had a stroke and it was really scary, and they just did a very good job with the production, the directing, and everything with that story, that I couldn't not put that ahead of General Hospital, because General Hospital gives us nothing compelling. They give us a lot of bad soap opera tropes that we shall get into today. I mean, the main thing that I have to talk about is still Spencer and Trina and Esme and Joss and Cam, because that is still the only story on the show, in my opinion, with any kind of hype, I guess, with any kind of spark, I guess. But we will talk about some of the other stories. First of all, I have to agree, I haven't talked about this yet, that the fact that this show decided to mourn Courtney for several episodes when it has done no kind of mourning of Alan, when Stuart Damon, the man that played Alan Quartermain for so long in the show, just died last year. But we have the time to pay tribute to Courtney, who is not on the same level. They kind of at least tied it into Spencer's story that he got out of Spring Ridge to visit his mother's grave. But I just feel like this just continues to show how out of touch the producer and the writers are with their own fan base, or they just go against their own fans for no reason, which is even more idiotic if that's the case. But sometimes that feels like the case. Sometimes it feels like Valentini tries to spite the fans with his stories, that which is some bad pro wrestling shit. And I have to tell you, pro wrestling's ratings have gotten really bad over the years because of that. And despite WWE being able to get a bunch of good TV deals, nobody respects American soap operas to get TV deals. So General Hospital should not be spiting their own fans like that, if that is actually the case. They continue to do a slow build with the Elizabeth story, with nobody really knowing where that's going, which I don't hate. I don't hate that I don't know where that story is going. So that's good on one hand, as long as it doesn't devolve into what everybody speculates, it being a DID story, because we don't need to see Elizabeth with split personalities and just doing bad takes that One Life to Live did for years under Ron and Valentini, and that Days of Our Lives did recently under Ron anyway. We don't need to see that story in daytime. We don't need to see most of these bad soap opera tropes anymore. Think outside the box. Maybe they will, because we don't know where the story is going, so I hope they do. Another decent thing I enjoyed, it was a throwback to Anna and Felicia being on an adventure, a throwback to the 80s. It wasn't on enough, and it wasn't that entertaining, but I like that they did that. So I'm getting my positives out of the way before I get to my negatives, because you all know, anybody that watches my channel know, that I can be really negative, but these are rankings, and if you watch like my top 3, top 5 soap operas, I give all positive most of the time, because they are so much better than this garbage that we get on most of the American soap operas. Another thing I liked, it's been a slow development still, but Chase and Brooklyn, they had a montage of their moments. So, I guess that's one good thing we can get for storylines that take a year or more, is we could have a good montage for one episode at least. Okay, the negatives. Brando and Sasha. Who cares? These two characters seem so far removed from the rest of the characters that I don't understand why they're even still on the show, because nobody cares about them. They've had some of the most negative things happen to them, and nobody still cares. Which also annoys me, because we have all these couples that actually have chemistry with these slow-ass builds, because General Hospital writers don't know how to write long stories without payoffs. They don't know how to give payoffs in their stories and keep building the story. Clearly, they don't know how. They only know how to write slowly, because once they have a payoff, they don't know where to go from there. So we get this shit. But then we have Brando and Sasha, whose story seems to move way faster than everybody else's story, and yet nobody cares about them. So what can you do? Now, I haven't quite truly broken down, like I've done a couple of GH videos in March, but I haven't truly broken down why the younger set story isn't going to work. Like, I mean, I did say in my last GH video just a couple days ago that the writers on GH have no talent, and I mean that they don't. So that is a big reason as to why the story isn't going to work. But they show they have no talent with the setup for this story, where we get it. It's a soap opera, and soap opera fans will put up with a lot of stupid stories, but the foundation of this story is stupid, because Esme sets up Trina by switching a phone case and by going back to a cabin that's owned by Sonny that doesn't have any video. Sonny's this big mobster, and there's no security cameras for a mobster who might be killed at any given notice. He has no security cameras at his cabin. Make it make sense. So the foundation of the story is, the setup is already weak as hell. And you can tell the setup is weak because now they've started to dumb down characters to make Esme work. But this is going to have a negative effect, because it's just going to build Esme as the latest cartoon villain on this fucking soap opera. General Hospital, I guess, just cannot function without cartoon villains. Because, unfortunately, Esme could be this great villain, but if you're going to start dumbing down characters to make Esme always get ahead, then she's going to be a cartoon. And you just got rid of Peter, so why are you going to have yet another cartoon villain that the fans are going to turn on sooner rather than later if they become a cartoon? So it's just a lot of bad writing that is going to make this story not worked. I mean, I've already talked about on my last video, I'm not going to get into it again, about how they are trying to write the story colorblind. When it comes to Trina, they already did it at the cabin, where she's surrounded by her right friends and she's drugged, and she somehow doesn't know she was drugged, even though Esme gave her a giant dose of that drug. And now they've arrested her, and that's not supposed to have real life implications. They don't know how to write this well socially. So it's just leaving me scratching my head why they continue to go in this direction with this story, rather than just move Trina and Spencer along, for fuck's sake. Just move them along. You don't have to throw a dozen roadblocks at them with no payoff. They threw another one with Esme faking a pregnancy, and they've alluded to that she might try to seduce or somehow be in bed with Nick to either try and get pregnant or to just cause more drama. I don't know, but she's getting closer and closer to that cartoon villain. She's not afraid of Ryan. It's a lot. They're just throwing a lot out there, and it's kind of a mess, and it's not great. They need to wrap up the Trina being blamed part pretty quickly, though, or it's going to devolve down a bad road that I don't think the show is ready for. I just don't understand. Is it because that they're an American soap opera and nobody cares about American soap operas anymore? So they think they could just get away with this really bad writing for their black characters, for this young black woman, and put her through real life scenarios and nobody's going to call them out? Because it's not going to work because Trina's popular. So that's not going to work. It's 2022. Can we evolve American soap operas? Can they evolve? Doesn't seem like they can. And then you got people on the cast like Nancy Lee Graham, when she comes across so ignorant constantly on Twitter. She has a past coming ignorant when it comes to black people, and now she had to put her white feminism into the Oscars when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, even though it was a work. I hate to tell y'all, it was a work. That was pro wrestling 101. If you watch that shit in slow-mo and Chris Rock knowing what's coming because he's bracing himself, you know it was staged. It was a half real slap, but it was a staged slap because it was just a staged thing to get buzz for the Oscars. And you all, well, maybe not you all, but a lot of you fall for that shit. Constantly. Nothing is real. Everything is pro wrestling. I hope you all starting to see that. The news. Everything is pro wrestling. I sound like a conspiracy theorist probably. But that was pro wrestling. And Nancy Lee Graham is acting like a Karen, and that Will Smith is just the worst. Oh my God. The worst. And then she has to be called out by General Hospital's black fans because this show, from top to bottom, even the actors, just a bunch of ignorance on General Hospital. It's just a bunch of ignorance and a lot of talentless people writing for them.